The bull slept in an abandoned station, shivering from the cold, until a homeless man covered it with his coat. What happens next will leave you speechless. The first sound was not what Calder expected. It was not the usual drip of rainwater through the shattered ceiling or the scratching of rats moving across the tiled floor. It was heavier, slower, like the breath of some large machine left running in the dark. He froze in the middle of the abandoned station's waiting hall, his satchel dangling loosely from his hand, and listened again. The sound came from the far corner, where moonlight cut across the cracked wall and illuminated something massive on the ground. At first, Calder thought his eyes were deceiving him. He rubbed them with cold fingers and blinked. The shape did not move, and for a moment he wondered if it was just a heap of discarded furniture or old sacks left behind by scavengers. But then the sound came again, a long, steady exhale that sent a puff of mist into the air. Calder's heart pounded. He had lived in Brantford Station long enough to know it held nothing larger than a dog or raccoon. Yet there, in the center of the hall where travelers once waited for trains, lay a bull. Its massive black body rose and fell with labored breaths, its frame filling the shadows as though it had been carved out of the darkness itself. He took a cautious step forward, his boots scraping on the grit-covered floor. The bull's ears twitched at the sound, and its head lifted weakly. Two wide, liquid eyes found him in the gloom, reflecting faint light with a weary but watchful glimmer. For an instant, Calder thought of turning back. Instinct told him to retreat, to let the animal rest undisturbed. Yet something rooted him in place. The bull was shivering. He could see the tremors rippling through its muscles, hear the faint clack of its teeth as it struggled against the cold that seeped into every corner of the station. Calder stood there in silence, the air from his lungs fogging in front of him, his fingers clenching around the strap of his satchel. He was not a man of courage anymore, not since the days when numbers and accounts had filled his world, but something about this creature struck him differently. "Easy. Easy now," Calder whispered, his voice rough from disuse. He crouched a little, lowering himself to seem less threatening. His words came out as a rasp that echoed against the hollow chamber. "I won't hurt you." The bull gave no sign of understanding, but its breathing shifted, slowing slightly as if the sound of a human voice eased it, if only a little. Calder glanced down at himself. His coat, worn thin and frayed at the sleeves, was the only thing standing between him and the chill. But he remembered the nights he had nearly frozen on this very bench, how a single layer of warmth had meant the difference between waking and never waking again. Looking back at the bull, its enormous body curled in on itself, he felt a pull deep inside. With a breath that steamed in the cold, Calder shrugged the coat from his shoulders. He moved forward carefully, every step echoing against the stone floor, until he stood just beside the bull. Its eyes followed him, not hostile but wary. Calder lowered the coat gently over the animal's shoulders, the fabric pitifully small against such a frame. Still, the gesture seemed to matter. The bull exhaled slowly, a warm gust against Calder's hands, and lowered its head until its chin brushed the ground. "There," Calder murmured, as if the word could make the act real. He stood for a moment, his body trembling from the sudden bite of the air on his skin, but also from the realization of what he had done. It was foolish, dangerous, yet it felt necessary, almost inevitable, like two forgotten lives meeting in the one place left for them both. The night dragged on. Calder sat on his bench, shivering now but keeping his gaze fixed on the corner. The bull did not move much, only shifting its weight or flicking its ears when the wind howled through the gaps in the roof. Calder wrapped his arms around himself for warmth, his teeth gritted against the ache in his bones. Yet when sleep threatened to claim him, he would glance at the coat draped across the bull's back and feel steadied, as though he had shared a burden with something greater than himself. When dawn finally crept into the station, bringing a weak glow through the broken glass, Calder pushed himself upright. His joints cracked in protest. He expected to find the corner empty, the bull gone like a strange dream. But there it remained, lying as before, though its breathing was calmer now. Calder stepped closer, squinting in the light. That was when he noticed the mark. On the bull's flank, seared into the hide, was a brand, 2 letters carved by fire and pressure into living flesh. The skin around it was still raw, the edges red and angry. Calder leaned closer, his brow furrowed. The letters were simple, but unmistakable. E.N. He touched the edge of the scar lightly, careful not to press against the wound. The bull flinched but did not resist. Calder drew back, his mind racing. A farm animal bore a brand for ownership, but this was not a farmer's mark. The neatness of it, the precision, the almost clinical placement, it all suggested something else, something colder. E.N., Calder whispered aloud, the sound tasting unfamiliar in his mouth. His eyes narrowed as the weight of questions pressed down on him. Who had marked this creature? Why was it here, alone in a forgotten station? And what kind of force could bring such a powerful beast to this state of weakness? He stood there for a long time, the chill gnawing at him but his thoughts burning hot. For years his days had blurred together in survival. Find food, find warmth, endure. But now, staring at the branded flank of the bull, he felt a spark he had thought long extinguished. Purpose. A reason to stay alert. A reason to fight. His fingers clenched into fists at his side. He did not know what EN stood for, nor what danger it carried. But he knew one thing. If others had hurt this bull, they might come looking for it again. And if they did, Calder could not simply step aside. Something in him refused. He had been trampled by life, left behind and forgotten. But for the first time in years he felt the stir of defiance. The bull shifted then, lifting its head to look at him directly. Calder met its gaze, seeing in those dark eyes a reflection of his own weary struggle. 2 lives cast aside, 2 beings clinging to what remained. He whispered again, softer this time, though his voice carried a strength he had not heard in himself for years. "I'll watch over you." The bull gave a low rumble in response, not quite a growl, not quite a sigh, but something that echoed through the vast hall. It was enough to seal the moment between them. Calder pulled his thin shirt closer to his body against the cold, but he did not regret the coat he had given away. In that moment, he knew his life was no longer just about surviving the night. It was about protecting this beast, even if he did not know why. Calder first noticed it when he rose before dawn to fetch scraps from a bakery's trash bins 2 streets away. He had expected to leave Brutus sleeping in the corner of the station, curled against the cold with the thin coat still draped across his back. But the moment Calder pushed open the rusted side door, a heavy sound of hooves followed. He turned sharply and saw the bull step into the shadows behind him, head low, as though refusing to let him walk into the darkness alone. At first Calder froze, torn between fear and awe. How could such a beast follow so quietly? The massive body moved with the caution of a hunting cat, each step deliberate. "Stay," Calder whispered, raising a hand. To his surprise, Brutus stopped instantly, his breath puffing clouds into the cold air. Tentatively, Calder stepped forward again, then called softly over his shoulder, "Come." The bull obeyed, moving closer, his heavy steps echoing off the broken walls. A tremor passed through Calder's chest. It was not coincidence. The animal understood him. From that day forward, Brutus never left his side. When Calder scavenged, the bull followed at a distance, waiting in alleys or ruined stairwells. When he slept, the creature rested nearby, its steady breathing louder than the winter wind. The bond unsettled Calder at first, but soon he grew to depend on it. After years of loneliness, the presence of something that listened and obeyed filled the emptiness with a fragile sense of companionship. Yet unease lingered. This was not natural. No ordinary bull should behave like this. His suspicion deepened one afternoon when voices echoed through the station. Calder was returning with a bundle of rags when he heard them. Men's voices, low and clipped, carrying the edge of authority. He pressed himself against a cracked pillar. Brutus crouched unnaturally still beside him. Through the shattered windows, Calder glimpsed 2 men near the entrance, both in heavy coats. They spoke into radios, scanning the shadows as though searching for something. On the doors of their parked vehicle gleamed a small silver shield, faint in the dim light but distinct. EN, the brand. Calder's stomach tightened. He ducked lower, straining to catch their words. The taller man's voice carried clearly, "Subject 37 has not been secured. Orders are to comb every structure within 5 blocks. Watch for runaways." Runaways. The word struck him like a blow. Brutus was not livestock at all. He was something, or someone, they considered a subject, like a number on a chart. The second man muttered, "Containment orders are strict. If we find it, neutralize if capture fails." Calder felt his breath falter. Neutralize. He glanced at Brutus, whose dark eyes gleamed faintly in the shadows. The bull's muscles quivered, as if he too understood the threat pressing against the air. When the men finally moved on, Calder leaned against the wall, his chest tight. He could not ignore what he had heard. Brutus was hunted. Whoever EN was, they had created him, and they would rather see him destroyed than free. The thought left Calder shaking, not only from fear, but from the weight of decision pressing down. He could betray Brutus, alert the men, and perhaps gain reward or safety. Or he could shield the creature, risking everything he had left. That night, in the silence of the hollow station, Calder made his choice. He sat across from Brutus, staring into the animal's glowing eyes, and whispered, "I won't give you up. Not for them. Not for anyone." Brutus exhaled heavily, lowering his head, and Calder felt the decision settle inside him like a stone, terrifying, but immovable. From then on, his life became strategy. He scavenged with precision, leaving the station only under cover of night. He boarded up the broken doors with discarded planks, hammering quietly while Brutus stood guard. He cleared an old supply room of mold and debris, layering it with rags and scraps of blanket for Brutus to rest. Every move carried risk, yet each day they survived together was a victory. But the men did not relent. Soon, more vehicles appeared around the neighborhood, their silver shield insignias flashing under street lamps. Calder noticed locals whispering with the men, some accepting folded bills before pointing toward alleys and side streets. Checkpoints began to appear, casual at first, then tighter, with strangers lingering near every corner. The net was closing. Calder adapted with desperation. He used the maze of train tunnels beneath the station, slipping into the underground paths to fetch food. Brutus followed silently, his heavy steps muffled by old dirt. Calder carried lanterns, their light flickering across walls streaked with age. Every night he returned soaked with sweat, his nerves taut as a wire. He had become a fugitive, though no crime had been named. One night, as Calder sat against the cold stone wall of the supply room, he noticed something that stole his breath. Brutus shifted in the dark, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes glowed faintly, not from reflected light, but from within. A thin, unnatural gleam pulsed deep in the black orbs, like fire behind glass. Calder sat motionless, his heart hammering. The glow faded as quickly as it had come, leaving the bull staring back with ordinary dark eyes. He whispered, his voice barely a thread, "What are you?" The bull gave no answer, only the slow, steady breath of something alive but burdened. Calder rubbed his hands over his face. Whatever EN had done, it was not natural. Brutus was no accident of nature, but a creation of design. The implications clawed at Calder's thoughts. If they reclaimed him, what would they use him for? The following day, Calder ventured out cautiously, slipping past a checkpoint to collect food from the bakery's waste. As he returned, he overheard two men in coats standing by their car. One muttered, "If the subject isn't contained soon, command will escalate." The other answered grimly, "Better it's burned out than wandering free." You know what it's capable of. Calder felt cold spread through his veins. He tightened his grip on the bread hidden under his shirt and slipped silently back into the tunnels. That night, as he laid the bread before Brutus, he whispered fiercely, "They'll come for you. But they'll have to come through me first." His voice cracked, but his hands were steady. The bull lowered its head, brushing Calder's arm with surprising gentleness. The silence of the station thickened with tension. Every creak of the building, every echo in the tunnels, carried threat. Calder no longer thought of survival for himself alone. His nights were a careful dance of concealment, his days filled with dread of footsteps in the hall. Yet through it all, he clung to the choice he had made. He had been powerless in life for too long. Protecting Brutus gave him purpose again, however dangerous. But as the bull's glowing eyes flickered once more in the darkness, Calder knew the stakes were higher than he had dared imagine. If the men reclaimed Brutus, the animal may not only be destroyed, but used in ways that could harm countless others. Calder froze the moment he saw the splintered wood. The outer doors of Brantford Station, doors he had carefully reinforced with scrap beams and chains, now hung open with fresh cracks spidering across their surfaces. The air smelled faintly of boot leather and dust unsettled by heavy footsteps. He bent low, his fingers brushing over the dirt floor. The prints were fresh, pressed deep by men moving quickly. His stomach knotted as he glanced over his shoulder. Inside, Brutus stood restless, muscles shifting beneath his dark hide, his breath steaming in the cold air. The bull's eyes flicked nervously toward the broken doors, and a low rumble vibrated from his throat. He knew what Calder already feared. Someone had been inside. Calder slipped inside the cavernous station, his pulse thudding against his ribs. The silence was too thick, too deliberate, like a room holding its breath. His eyes darted across the empty benches, the collapsed ticket booth, the fractured tiles where weeds had clawed through. Nothing stirred. Still, he could sense them. He had lived too many years on the street not to recognize the signs of hunters circling unseen. His hand trembled as he reached for Brutus's muzzle, steadying the animal's unease. "They're close," Calder whispered, voice hoarse with exhaustion but edged with determination. Brutus huffed, warm air brushing Calder's arm, as if answering an agreement. For the first time since discovering the bull, Calder felt time pressing against him. Every hour he lingered here was an invitation for the hunters to tighten their net. He looked at the great beast, then at the long shadows stretching into the tunnels. The thought came unbidden. He had to move Brutus. It was madness. How could one old man lead such a massive creature through underground passages without being seen or heard? But staying was no longer an option. The broken doors were a promise. The hunters would return, and they would not knock politely next time. Calder scavenged quickly. He dragged out 2 rusted maintenance carts from the old supply bay, their wheels stiff from years of neglect. With rope he had hoarded for blankets and tarps, he fashioned crude harnesses. Brutus shifted uncertainly, his massive hooves scraping against the floor. Calder spoke in low, calming tones, pulling the rope across the bull's shoulders. "We're leaving, boy. Tonight. You've hidden long enough." His words were firm, but his throat tightened as he said them. He was not only speaking to Brutus, he was speaking to himself. The journey began in dim light. Calder lit a lantern, shielding it with a cracked tin so the glow barely spread beyond their path. The tunnels stretched ahead like black arteries of stone, dripping with condensation and littered with debris. Every sound seemed louder. The squeak of wheels, the scuff of hooves, the groan of metal as Brutus resisted the awkward contraption. Calder urged him onward, step by step, sweat dripping down his brow despite the chill. His breath rasped, his old lungs struggling under the effort. But he did not stop. They crept deeper into the earth. Once, Calder froze when faint echoes of voices drifted from behind. Men, speaking in clipped tones, their footsteps measured and confident. He pressed himself against the wall, pulling the lantern low. Brutus stood still, his massive body quivering but silent. The hunters' voices faded, leaving behind only the hum of the underground silence. Calder exhaled shakily. They had not been spotted. Not yet. Hours seemed to pass as they wound through the tunnels. Calder's arms ached from tugging the ropes, and the cartwheels shrieked faintly at every turn. Just as despair began gnawing at him, Brutus stopped. The bull's hooves scraped against stone, refusing to move forward. Calder pulled gently, then firmly, but Brutus stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the wall ahead. "Come on," Calder pleaded, voice cracking. But Brutus did not move. His breathing deepened, nostrils flaring. Calder lifted the lantern higher. That was when he saw them, strange carvings etched faintly into the stone wall. Symbols arranged in neat rows, weathered but unmistakable. His eyes widened. They matched the brand scarred into Brutus's flank, the same curling lines he had once thought meaningless. Calder staggered back, his pulse racing. The truth pressed in like the weight of the earth itself. Brutus had not wandered here by chance. This station had once been part of something larger, a network that moved more than trains. It had carried secrets tied to the bull's very existence. Brutus snorted, stamping once, and for the first time Calder thought he saw understanding in the animal's eyes. It was as if Brutus recognized this place, remembered it in some deep, primal way. Calder reached out, resting his palm against the bull's warm hide. "They made you here," he murmured, voice filled with awe and sorrow. "And you came back, to where it all began." Before the revelation could settle, the sound of boots thundered from behind. Harsh beams of flashlights cut through the darkness. The hunters had caught up. "There!" a voice barked, echoing off the tunnel walls. Calder's heart surged with fear. He grabbed the rope, tugging Brutus with renewed urgency. "Move!" he cried, his voice raw. Brutus obeyed this time, pushing forward as beams of light slashed closer. The chase erupted in chaos. Calder's lantern swung wildly, shadows racing across stone. The hunters advanced with ruthless precision, their weapons gleaming under artificial light. Calder darted left into a narrow passage, pulling Brutus behind. The bull's bulk scraped the walls, sparks flying from his horns. Shouts erupted. The hunters were splitting, cutting them off. Calder's mind raced. He could not outrun them, not with Brutus in tow. But the tunnels were crumbling, their ceilings sagging, their beams rusting. He could use that. He veered toward a section where water dripped steadily from cracks above. As the hunters entered, Calder shoved a half-broken support beam with all his weight. The structure groaned, then gave way. Stone crashed down, filling the passage with choking dust. Shouts of anger and pain rang out behind him, but the way was blocked. For now. He coughed, eyes burning, but forced himself onward. Brutus pressed close, his flank brushing Calder's arm like a shield. More footsteps came from the side passages, more beams of light. They were surrounded. One of the hunters' voices rang out through the dust. "Surrender the animal! He belongs to Eridane Nexus!" The name cut through Calder like a knife. He had heard whispers of it before, among drifters and broken men who had seen things they were not supposed to. Eridane Nexus, a company that existed in shadows, rumored to craft weapons not from steel, but from flesh. Experiments, engineered creatures, monstrosities hidden behind locked doors. His gaze darted to Brutus, to the scar on his side, to the intelligence burning behind those dark eyes. The bull was not merely livestock. He was proof of something darker, something powerful. Calder's hands shook as he snatched a radio dropped by one of the hunters in the chaos. Static crackled, followed by clipped voices. "Unit 3, close the perimeter. Nexus wants him alive. No mistakes. The confirmation struck Calder harder than any weapon could. This was not just a hunt, it was a reclamation. Brutus was theirs, and they would not stop until he was dragged back into their cages. He looked at the bull, standing firm despite the chaos. Brutus's chest rose and fell heavily, his breath steaming in the lantern light. Yet there was no wild rage in him, no blind violence. Instead, Calder saw loyalty. He saw a creature that, despite being engineered for war, had chosen gentleness when it could have destroyed. The thought filled him with a fierce, protective fire. From the shadows, the hunters advanced again, their voices sharp. "Last chance, old man." Step aside, Calder straightened, every bone in his body aching, every instinct screaming at him to run. But he did not. His voice carried across the tunnel, steady despite his fear. "He's not yours anymore. He'll never go back." There was silence. Then, slowly, the hunters withdrew into the shadows, their flashlights dimming, their boots retreating step by step. It was not mercy, it was a warning. Their message had been delivered. They would be back, and when they returned, they would not leave without blood. Calder's chest burned as he stumbled out of the tunnel's mouth, the cold night air slapping his face. Brutus followed close behind, his massive frame heaving with exhaustion, yet his eyes were sharp, alert to every flicker of movement in the shadows. Behind them, the last echoes of boots and shouting faded into silence, but Calder knew better than to think they were safe. The hunters had only pulled back, regrouping for another strike. He leaned heavily against a broken fence post, catching his breath, and looked at the bull with a weary but defiant gaze. "We're not done," he muttered, his voice rasping with both exhaustion and certainty. Brutus stamped once, his breath steaming in the icy air, as if agreeing. Together, they left Brantford Station behind, slipping into the outskirts of the city where silence reigned, and only the hum of distant street lamps marked the boundary of human life. By dawn, whispers had already spread. Calder overheard them as he scavenged through alleys and shelters for scraps of food. "A wild bull loose in the city," a man hissed nervously near a bakery door. "Dangerous beast, they say." "Big as a wagon," another voice chimed in. "Saw broken streets near Brantford." "Something powerful's roaming. Better keep indoors at night." Calder's jaw clenched as he listened. The story was already being twisted, bent to serve fear. He had not seen the hunters since leaving the station, but their reach was everywhere. They were seeding panic before the people even saw Brutus. When Calder returned to their makeshift refuge, a crumbling warehouse on the city's edge, Brutus was waiting, his dark shape filling the shadows. Calder's eyes fell on the scattered gear they had dragged from the tunnels after the fight. Among the broken lanterns and cracked radios, one object caught his attention, a steel case marked with the faint initials EN. His pulse quickened. With trembling fingers, he forced the latches open. Inside lay folders wrapped in plastic, each stamped with official seals. He pulled one free and opened it beneath a shaft of light leaking through the broken roof. His eyes scanned the words, clinical terms, numbers, diagrams. His throat tightened as he turned a page. Not just subject B-17, which matched the brand scar on Brutus's side, but others, C-24, H-11, M-03. Notes detailed their strengths, speed, aggression, resilience, and their locations. Calder's hands shook as realization sank in. Brutus was not the only one. The hunters were not chasing a single bull, they were guardians of a larger secret. Other creatures existed, scattered, controlled, hidden by Aridane Nexus. Calder sank onto a crate, clutching the file as if it might vanish. For a long moment, despair threatened to crush him. What could one man, homeless and alone, possibly do against a force so vast? But as Brutus shifted beside him, lowering his massive head until it nearly touched Calder's shoulder, something sparked inside him. He remembered the night he had laid his old coat over the trembling beast, an act of instinctive kindness. That single choice had unraveled everything, revealed a conspiracy, drawn out hunters, and brought him face to face with horrors crafted in secrecy. If one act could change so much, perhaps another could too. He whispered into the stillness, "It can't just be about running anymore. They'll keep making more. They'll keep hunting." His voice gained strength as he spoke, eyes fixed on the folder's pages. "If no one else will stop them, then I will." The decision reshaped him. He was no longer just a man trying to survive with a bull at his side. He was a witness, the only one holding proof that Aridane Nexus was twisting life itself into weapons. For the first time in years, Calder felt a purpose beyond the daily fight for food or warmth. He had a mission. The days that followed were marked by caution and planning. Calder knew he could not take his evidence to the authorities. The hunter's precision proved the company had influence deep within official channels. Instead, he began whispering to men like himself, those who lived on the edges, invisible to society but sharp-eyed and suspicious of power. He found them in soup lines, in derelict factories, under bridges where fires burned in steel barrels. Some scoffed at his talk of engineered beasts, but others listened, drawn by the urgency in his voice and the files he carefully revealed. One man, a wiry ex-laborer named Hensley, leaned close as Calder showed him the documents. His face was weathered, his hands cracked. "I've heard of Aridane Nexus," he muttered, eyes darting nervously. "Men disappear after working at their plants. No records. Families told never to ask another." A quiet figure called Jarek added, "If you want to bring them down, you'll need more than papers. You'll need proof the world can't deny." Calder nodded, absorbing every word. Proof. That was the key. Brutus himself was the proof, a living contradiction. Bred for violence, yet capable of loyalty, standing calmly beside a broken man who had given him nothing but trust. But the hunters were not idle. Posters appeared in alleys, crude warnings of a dangerous bull sighted near the city edge. Men in dark coats asked questions in shelters, offering money for information. Fear spread quickly, and Calder knew the net was tightening again. Still, he pressed forward, gathering allies in whispers, hiding Brutus in places only the forgotten knew, abandoned rail cars, hollowed warehouses, beneath the shadow of ruined factories. Each night, he studied the files, mapping connections, piecing together a picture of Aridane Nexus's web. One evening, as the city slept under a silver moon, Calder sat by a broken window, the coat he once laid over Brutus draped across his shoulders. He realized then that it had become more than cloth. It was a marker of the turning point in his life, a symbol of defiance. He was no longer the man who wandered without direction. He was the man who chose to stand, who chose to protect, who chose to fight. Brutus shifted nearby, his horns catching the moonlight. Calder looked at him and said softly, "You were meant to be their weapon. But you're more than that. Together, we'll show them the truth." In the distance, he thought he saw movement, dark figures lingering at the city's edge, patient as wolves. The hunters had not abandoned their pursuit. They were waiting, watching, biding their time. But Calder no longer felt crushed beneath that knowledge. Instead, it steeled him. The fight was only beginning, but now he had something the hunters could never understand, resolve born not from power, but from purpose. So when dawn came, Calder and Brutus walked side by side into the outskirts, the horizon painted in pale light. The city behind them buzzed with rumors and lies, while ahead lay uncertainty and danger. But for the first time in years, Calder's steps were firm. What had started as a single act of kindness, laying a coat over a trembling bull, had become a battle against powers far larger than he ever imagined. And Calder was ready to see it through. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores powerful themes of compassion, unexpected friendships, and the profound, unspoken bonds that can form between a human and an animal. This narrative aims to highlight that true worth transcends material possessions, and that kindness can be found in the most unlikely of places.